We're in the middle of a marriage series, and last week we started it, this week's in the middle, and I wanted to talk about how to resolve conflict in marriage. And I thought it wouldn't be fair if I talked about conflict in marriage and while she was sitting in the front row. So we had to kind of try to make it fair. That's good. But you know, our marriage has never had a conflict.
Never. Not
Which
once.
is what makes us the expert on talking about this.
Yep,
Yeah,
never.
that's right.
Not a single fight in 15 years.
Nope, never once.
We've never actually had a conflict, but we've heard about other people having conflicts, right?
Yeah, sure.
So maybe we could, talk about Amanda and Mark, maybe, who have had a conflict in their
Mark.
life
Yeah,
at
let's
some
do
point.
Mark.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that works good.
So maybe they fought about, I'm just throwing it out there, totally making it up, dishes.
Yeah, Mark is working hard all day.
All day.
He comes home and there's a big pile of dirty dishes, and sometimes Amanda will ask Mark to do the dishes, and he's like, "Man, I've been working all day."
Because Amanda doesn't work at all, and so it's her responsibility to do the dishes? Or?
I don't know. I think Mark is just saying that, Amanda made him dirty, so maybe Amanda should clean him.
Oh, so Amanda made him dirty, but just maybe, Amanda made him dirty making food for Mark?
Food that Mark bought at the store paid for the money for.
Oh. That might make Amanda upset if she heard that. Maybe.
Yeah, well, maybe Mark's getting tired of this.
Well, maybe Mark needs to pick up the pace around the house and do a little more, not just in the dishes.
I can't do this anymore. Oh.
We might have had a conflict or two in our lives. Maybe.
And the passive-aggressive method there probably isn't the best way to handle a conflict. But we've worked out our dishes stuff. We've worked out those things. And every relationship has conflict. Every relationship has conflict. Now, we're going to talk about marriage and marriage conflict. But honestly, even relationships in work, or if you're dating, you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, there's conflict in those relationships. There's conflict within your family. If you're like a kid talking to a parent, or parents to kids, or siblings, or uncles and aunts and grandparents, as soon as you get two people together, you're going to have conflict. You know why? Because no two people agree 100% on every detail of life. They don't. It's just impossible. So you're going to have conflict. And if you're in a relationship and you say, "Man, we have just never had a conflict," somebody's lying. Somebody's saying that they're happy and when they're really not. They're saying they're basically trying to keep the peace in kind of an unhealthy way. And so every relationship has conflict. When I was a kid, I remember playing with these magnets. And many of you guys have played with magnets before, but you've seen how when you take two magnets and you put them together, they repel each other. But with a slight adjustment to the positioning of those magnets, all of a sudden they're attracted to one another. And so I want to say that conflict is like a set of magnets. Depending how you position yourself in the conflict will determine whether your conflict in your marriage repels each other in different directions, or that same conflict, it's possible, that same conflict can actually draw you guys closer together. And so we're going to look at 1 Peter chapter 3. That's the set of scripture verses we're going to look at this morning. And so 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 8 through 11 says, "Finally, all of you, be like-minded, be sympathetic, love one another, be compassionate and humble." In verse 9, it says, "Do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult. On the contrary, repay evil with blessing, because to this you were called, so that you may inherit a blessing." And in verse 11, it continues. It says, "They must turn from evil and do good. They must seek peace and pursue it." I'm sorry, I missed 10, didn't I? Did I skip 10? I skipped 10.
He's nervous because his wife is next to him.
Maybe. Verse 10. We'll do that over again. Verse 10, "For whoever would love life and see good days must keep their tongue from evil and their lips from deceitful speech." So 11, they must turn from evil
and do
good. Thank you. They must seek peace and pursue it. Seek peace and pursue it. So point number 1 this morning is this. remember that you are on the same team. If you are married, you are on the same team. Sometimes it might feel like you're on opposite teams, but in verse 8 it said, be like-minded, be sympathetic towards one another. You're on the same team.
So when you're on the same team, I got to stand up. Do I have to sit here the whole time?
Stand up.
It feels weird sitting. I want to show you my shoes, right? We all know I got my shoe thing. When you're on the same team with somebody, you don't compete with them internally, right? How many of you have played a team sport? Just to show of hands. I know there's some back in here. So when you're on that team, you're not competing against your team members. You're competing against the other team. And so if you think of your marriage in that same context and you look at the big picture, what's the goal to be married? My goal to be married to Matt is to have a happy, healthy relationship. And so if that's my main goal, and I know that, even when we come into conflict and we have a disagreement, we understand that the end goal is that our team still wins. So where you put the problem that you're having in your relationship matters.
So let's just pretend this little angry bird is our problem here. Maybe it's the dishes. Maybe it's who you put in your conflict that you have going on. Obviously, dishes are unique to us. Same with the trash. I'm a little nervous.
You should be. You can take the youth pastors out of youth group, but you can't take youth group out of the youth pastors.
We do hunt each other with these things around the house sometimes.
I have been shot in the eye numerous times from him.
So the conflict is being shot in the eye, and if you have this conflict in the middle, let's just say this little character here is a conflict. You see, if you position the conflict where it's in between the two of you, you feel like, emotionally, when you're in the conflict, I feel like I'm attacking the problem. But what happens is while I'm aiming for the problem, there's some collateral damage that happens in the middle of that. And so, right?
Yes, and in fact, you hit me in the forehead. So now I feel attacked, right? Personally attacked. Now we're still talking about the problem. We still have the problem, and it's in between us, and now I feel attacked, and I'm a little annoyed. So what am I going to do?
Of course, now I'm feeling very attacked. And although the language that I'm using is probably geared around what the problem is, I'm not pointing at the problem as much as I am really the other person.
So now we're really angry at each other, and we have forgotten about the problem in the middle because we've started attacking each other. So we've forgotten that the big picture, the overall goal of being in relationship with each other is that we're on the same team and that we love each other and that we don't want to hurt each other by attacking the problem in the middle. So the reality is it's really important where you position this problem in your relationship.
You know, by the words that you choose and the way that you discuss this, and we're going to get into this, we're laying out the intro, that how you handle your problem in your marriage, how you handle the conflict in any relationship in life is really important. And in order to be like-minded and sympathetic towards one another, if the problem creeps into the middle, you are not like-minded and you're not sympathetic towards each other. So what you have to do is you have to get the problem out of the middle of the two of you, and you got to put it out in front of you somewhere. You know, so you got to put it way out there, and there's our problem. Who's got the problem? Hold it up. Where we go? And so then, as a couple, now you're on the same team.
I'm out. We defeated the problem.
That's right, Team Williams, right here. Woo! Give it up. Woo! Forever, you guys are going to remember Nerf guns in church, right? But I really believe this is going to help. Uh-oh. This little guy's, he's cute. So, he talks. All right, so you got to be able to be on the same team, and it's really what it is. And so you demonstrate your love by what you say and how you act toward the other person. So sympathy is the need to be understood and to feel affirmed. So if I got to show sympathy and be sympathetic, which means this, I got to seek to understand the other person before I'm trying to be understood myself. So many times we enter a conflict, and I want you to understand my side of the equation before I even try to understand your side of the equation.
And when you approach the conflict like that, you're not really listening to the other person. You're just thinking about what your next rebuttal is going to be. So you're saying your piece and you're right, and then he can say anything in the world and it doesn't matter because you already have your next piece of ammo that you're going to shoot at him.
So true. And so if we have the mentality that we're in this together, we're in a marriage together, we're in a relationship together, that means we're on the same team. Right? So we're on the same team, we're in the same marriage, we're in the same family. So here's the thing, we don't compete against each other. We need to be able to be in a place where we complete each other. So we don't compete, we complete. So if we're on the same team, I got to know that she has my back. I got to know she has my back. Because if I don't know that she has my back, if there's not this trust situation here, then what ends up happening is then I don't want to share everything with her because I'm afraid she's going to use it as ammo against me. Because then I'm thinking, are we competing all the time versus completing all the time? And so there's this whole, like, I got to know that you have my back, that we're not fighting against each other.
And when you know that you're not fighting against each other anymore, now you've put the problem out here and you're fighting against the problem, now you have the ability to be on the same team and to be vulnerable with each other. You know, if I know that he has my best interest at heart, I'm much more likely to say, hey, I really messed up and I need your forgiveness, because I know he's not going to use it against me. He's going to help me, because the ultimate goal is for us to win the big picture, which is our marriage. Not the fight and the problem, but we want to win the big picture where we're on the same team. So being able to have that intimacy and to say my weaknesses to him allows me to say things like, I need your help. I was wrong. And I'm not afraid that he's going to turn that around and use that to win the argument in between the two of us.
Yeah, so true. So we're going to move on to verse 9 in this section of verse. And in verse 9 it says this, do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult. On the contrary, repay evil with a blessing, because this you were called to, so that you may inherit a blessing. So here's the thing, you don't want to tear each other down, right? Like at the end of the day, you win the fight and you've torn your spouse down. So who's the real loser, right? Like you are, because you've torn your spouse down, you've damaged the relationship. So you want to build each other up, not tear each other down. Here's something that Amber and I have worked through, is that we have decided, we're going to talk about this in a minute, about how we set rules for fighting. We have Fight Club rules.
And it does not involve the Nerf gun.
That's right. So don't assume the worst in each other. Think about that. Don't assume the worst in each other. Because I could come home and see the dishes on the counter piled up, and I could think, for sure you had 30 minutes somewhere today to do this. But we've been fighting about this for a few days. You left those dishes there on purpose. It's because you know that bothers me, or you know. So if I can start assuming the worst in my spouse, I'm already starting off on the wrong foot. I'm starting to take words like, you're doing this, and I can't believe you did this. And instead of saying, oh, look, the dishes need to be done. You know, so don't assume the worst in each other.
And I think that becomes harder the longer that you have been married to someone. Because when you are first dating and engaged, it's all roses and rainbows and happy thoughts. And you automatically assume the best in them. They love you, I love them, we're in love, everything's great. But then you start to have real fights in your marriage, and you start to have real conflicts. And the longer you are together, the stronger your marriage becomes, but the harder it is for you to remember the basic of, no, he's got my best interest at heart, and I want to assume the best in him. Because he chose me, and I chose him. We didn't have to get married. We chose to get married. And I think when you forget to assume the best in your spouse, you're forgetting that it was a decision you both made out of love to be with one another.
Yeah, so good. And so with a conflict, if you have a conflict in your marriage or a conflict in your relationship, you end up with a little bit of a fire that happens, right? There's a little flame that happens. The words that you choose to use against that flame make a huge difference, because it's a difference between gasoline and water. If you were to throw gas on that fire, it would just explode into a huge argument, a huge eruption. Things will be said that you don't want to say. Your spouse will say things that you can't unhear. You'll say things that will cause long-term damage if you start throwing the gasoline on that fire. But the same token, though, you can use your words and put water on that fire and help to quench that conflict rather than explode that conflict. See, when you watch our culture and you watch our world and you really just look at human nature is to be right, to win, to beat the other person. But what happens when you fall into that category is you end up throwing gas on that fire, and you take what was a small confrontation, the dishes, and you can turn it into a multi-day battle fest in your home. And it's not hard to do. In fact, it doesn't take any real skill to do that. You know what I mean? Like, nobody has to work hard to turn a small conflict into a massive fire. It'll go there on its own if you just go down your natural course. But in order to kill that fire in your marriage, kill that conflict in your marriage, you got to put some effort into it. So the world says, and our natural position says, let's get even. But in verse 9 in the Bible right here, it says, no, don't return insult for insult. Return insult for blessing, which means you need to be a blessing to your spouse, even while they're maybe doing something that could be perceived as a slight against you. And that takes some skill. That takes some intentionality. Nothing inside of you is going to feel right about returning a blessing for them doing something that's a conflict. So to give blessing is to give the other person some slack, to overlook some of the minor faults, to understand that everyone has a bad day, to give more kindness than justice demands. So here's the thing. I got a minor fault in my life, 1 or 2, 10, 15, 100.
None at all.
None at all. That's right. But Mark is the guy that's got a problem.
Mark has a major problem.
But Matt's pretty good, right? All right, that works. And so, I got some minor cracks in the armor, I got some things in my life. Guess what? We're human. We have these things. I have bad days from time to time. I maybe say little things and do little things that aren't the best decision. You know what I want from my spouse? I want a little grace, and I want a little love, and I want to have a little wiggle room and maybe a little bit of slack every once in a while, because every once in a while, I just don't make the right decision. And if I want that slack for me, I got to be able to give that to her. I got to return blessing for insult, just like the Word of God says.
I think it's kind of interesting being parents, too. We give grace to our kids pretty freely. They will do something and we know, we cut them the slack that we should also be cutting to our spouse. And I don't know if it's easier because they're our children, they're a part of us, and our spouse, isn't technically a part of me. But the grace that you give your kids, how much more should you give your spouse, who you'll spend the rest of your life, hopefully, with? Your kids grow up and move out. Your spouse is there, hopefully, for the rest of your life. So to have that grace and to be able to say, I'm going to keep my focus on the big picture. And I don't believe that anybody gets married thinking, I'm going to torture this person for the rest of their life. I just want to get married so I can make you miserable. I believe that when you say, I want to marry this person, it's because you love for them and you care for them more than anybody else that you have found in your world. And you want to be with that person. And again, it comes back to the big picture. The big picture is, I may win the fight. I may win the argument because I have stored up all the ammunition and I can tell him every time he did something wrong and he should feel this way because he made me feel this way. And he may give in and he may be defeated. But now, where does that leave me? I've won and our marriage has lost. Yeah. Don't win your fight only to lose your marriage. Are you fighting to win against your spouse? Or are you fighting to win against the problem? Because if you can take the conflict out of here and say, our ultimate goal is to remain married and in love for the rest of our lives. And yes, there's a real problem here. These dishes have got to be dealt with. The problem is real. I mean, I'm making light of it, calling it dishes, but the problem is real, and you do have to deal with it. But there's a way to put it where you don't have to hurt each other to deal with the problem. Your marriage is more important than winning the argument.
For those of you wondering how the dishes situation resolves, we'll let
Mark
you know next
and
week.
Amanda made a decision. No, you don't want to tell them?
No, so here's what we worked out, because the dishes thing was a real issue.
Mark and Amanda.
Sorry. It was a real, Matt and Amber.
All right.
Matt and Amber. We had a real issue with real dishes, and we had this conflict was something that we had to work through. And it's an easy one to talk about without being too embarrassed. So, because I don't want to talk about the embarrassing ones with you guys. But the tactics still are the same. And so here's what we worked out was Amber was able to share, hey, listen, I feel like I'm not being supported as much. Well, as a husband, I'm like, well, I want you to be supported. I don't really feel like you're in this with me as I need a little more help from you. Well, let me know what I want to do. What do you want me to do? And she's like, I just, at the end of the day, I've been cooking and cleaning and doing other things. And she actually has her own business, and she works a lot out of the home as well. And she still takes care of the kids. And honestly, she works harder than I do. Don't tell her. And it's our secret, okay?
Oh, I know.
But so we get in this place where there's these dishes. Well, we came to this agreement. She's like, if there was one day a week where I just knew that it was your dish day, I didn't have to worry about it, that would make me feel a lot better. And so we picked Sunday is my dish day. So every Sunday, no matter what is on the table or getting done, it's my dish day. I do it. And so I'm pretty good about it most of the time. Every once in a while, it's like she'll kind of poke at me in fun. She'd be like, ha, sucker, it's your dish day, and
I will make the most elaborate meal on Sunday, use every dish in the cabinet. We're eating on the china. We're using all kinds of glasses. Oh, I'm done with this drink. I need another drink on dish day. And the funny thing is, as the other half of this conflict, I don't know why I couldn't just say, hey, Matt, will you do the dishes? Because his answer would be, yeah, sure, no problem. But for some reason, I just wanted him to know the dishes needed to be done and it was his turn. But he doesn't know that because we don't share the same brain, thankfully. We're two separate people. And he doesn't just know and anticipate my need. I need to be able to say, hey, can you please do the dishes? And then I don't want to nag and ask all the time. So being able to come up with an agreement that I agree to, that he agrees to, it feels very businesslike, but it has resolved the conflict. And there's freedom in that because I don't even think about it anymore. If there's a bunch of dishes on Sunday, it's his turn.
Yes. And then, gentlemen, I know you're hearing this. Listen, we all know this. Men are pretty simple-minded creatures, right? Every dude is like, yeah, we're totally very simple-minded creatures, right? And so we see a big pile of dirty dishes, and we may not even notice it. But it's been grinding her gears all day long, and she's like, these things are killing me, and I don't even notice. And but now here's what happens. Is on Sunday I know it's my day, but because I love my wife and I want to show love to her, here's what I do. So yesterday I got up in the morning and there were some dishes left over from the day before. Friday night's dishes were left on the counter because we hadn't gotten to them yet. So Saturday morning I get up and I unload the dishwasher and I do all the dishes, even though it's not my dish day. So because the agreement is set up, listen to this. Gentlemen, you want to do this. I'm telling you, you want to earn some points with your wife. This is what you do. You set the expectation and you overachieve it. So now when dish day is Sunday, on Saturday I'm doing the dishes. Now if we didn't have that agreement, Amber might be feeling, well, it's about time, Buster, But now the same situation exists, but now I'm doing the dishes on Saturday, and now my wife is saying, wow, babe, thank you so much. She's genuinely appreciative, and I'm genuinely going above and beyond. And so setting these terms up on your conflict that's what allows you to be the magnet. Instead of pulling each other apart, you pull each other closer together because you've set the terms on the contract. And I hate to call it a contract, but it really kind of is that way. You set the terms on the agreement, and then you're able to overexceed them. Because dudes, gentlemen, we know, this is the minimum. And it's I know I can do a little bit more than the minimum. You know you can do a little more than the minimum. In fact, honestly, deep down in your heart, husbands, I know you want to do more than the minimum. You want your wife to feel loved. And so when you come to an agreement on what you're going to do, gentlemen, just step up a little bit above that, and all of a sudden your wife feels loved. The same situation, dirty dishes on Saturday morning. But now, instead of doing it about time, Buster, the same action results in, wow, babe, you're the best in the world. And so set those contracts, set that thing up. We kind of deviated a little bit from our notes here. But that's good stuff, I think. That's something that we've worked on, and it's gone well. So the third point I want to make today is out of verse number 10, and it says this, for whoever would love life and see good days must keep their tongue from evil and their lips from deceitful speech. You got to be able to control your tongue. You have to. You have to be able to control your tongue. You see, the mark of spiritual and emotional maturity is the ability to master your mouth. And maturity and age are not necessarily connected. You can be older in age and younger in maturity. And young people, you can be very mature and young in age. So they're not necessarily connected. So in order to master your maturity, you need to master your mouth. So there's maturing versus aging. You see, your mouth can bring blessing or bleeding to your spouse. Because the power of life and death is in the tongue. In Proverbs chapter 18, it says that the power of life and death is in the tongue, which means this: words kill or words give life. Your words will kill your spouse, or your words can give life to your spouse. Your words are poison or your words are fruit, and only you can decide what your words are going to be. Only you can decide that. So, the way to diffuse conflict is to control our verbal reactions. One of the things that Amber and I had to work on was this, is as a man, I feel like I'm a very simple-minded individual. And my wife is brilliant. She's so brilliant. We would get into a little bit of a conflict, and she'd be already 4, 5, 6 steps down the road in the conversation and the way it's going to go. And I'm still trying to figure out what was said a minute ago, and I'm still processing. How many men are like, yeah, see, all you men are like, yeah, I got that.
Wait, you're mad at me?
Right, and I'm still trying to figure out what. But here's what happens. You see, the temptation for both sides is that when it starts to dial up and it starts to get a little bit heated, as a man, I'm not thinking through what I'm saying. So the result ends up being I say some really dumb stuff that really just aggravates it. And I don't want to throw gas on this conflict and blow this thing up, but it happens. In fact, I can remember conflicts where as the words are coming out of my mouth, I'm like, no, trying to pull them back in. And it's like, no, bring them back. I don't mean that. And you can say sorry 1,000 times, but the words came out of your mouth and you can't put them back. And so here's something we worked on. Every dude needs like a garage. Every dude needs like a workshop. You know what I mean? You need to be, if it's a fighting match, a boxing match, you need to be in a place where you can call around and call a little bit of time out. And so our key word for this is I'm able to say this. I'm able to say processing. Babe, I'm processing. AKA, I've heard what you said. I'm processing internally. I don't want to spew gas on this fight and make it worse than it is. I'm processing. I want to say the right things. I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to catch up, basically, because I'm a simple-minded human being. And so I'm trying to catch up. And so I say the word processing. And now Amber basically says, oh, okay, like no problem.
Yeah, because it's that easy. I'm like, oh, sure, no problem. No, it's not. But I made the conscious decision of, okay, he has told me that he needs to catch up, and that's fine, So I would say something, and he wouldn't respond. So I would say something, and he wouldn't respond, and then I'd say something and say something and say something again. And then I'm like, why aren't you talking to me? And he's still thinking, holy cow, what's going on? So I've accelerated it and brought it up, and now I'm really mad. And for him to be able to say, even at the first step, like, hey, I'm processing, I have to just know, okay, he is hearing me. Because when you say something to your spouse and they don't say anything in return, do you feel heard? No. So you say it again, or you say it a different way. But the reality was he was hearing me. He just needed a minute. And so it took practice, and it took time, and it took patience. But again, my big picture goal is to be married to this man for the rest of my life in a happy marriage. And so if he needs a minute to process when we're in the middle of a fight, I can cool it.
Yeah, it's good. So my question for you today is this: is your tongue under control, or you just let it loose? Some of you might have struggled with you just let it loose on your spouse right there. Or maybe this is even more destructive, is to walk away and go to work and then let your tongue loose on your coworkers. Let your tongue loose on your family members, on your mom and your dad. You start talking negative things about your spouse to other people. Your spouse doesn't need to hear those words in order for those words to have the damage in your own heart. Your negative words have to stop. You got to grow up and be mature and get those words to stop. I know the other guys around the shop are saying bad things about their wife and ragging on their old lady or whatever they want to, however they go, right? They go, I've been there. I've seen guys and seen it going that way. But when you start partaking in that talk, here's what happens. You get in a fight with your spouse. You dump all over your family, your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister. Well, then later that day, you get it resolved with your spouse. But you don't go back to your family and start bragging. You forget about going back and bragging about how amazing your spouse is. So then a couple days later, you're having a barbecue and your family comes over, and the whole thing's a little awkward because the whole time they're secretly trying to figure out what kind of a scumbag is this person? Because all you've ever done is share the scumbag report on your spouse. So you can't do that. You're sowing seeds of death into your marriage when you start talking bad about your spouse, even if they're not there. Because the power of life and death is in the tongue. So I want to challenge you to discipline your tongue. And so we're going to verse number 11. And it says this, they must turn from evil and do good. They must seek peace and pursue it. So are you pursuing peace? Are you pursuing peace? You see, the job of a firefighter is to put out fires, not to start them. The job of a peacemaker is to make peace, not destroy it. Are you pursuing peace? Are you being a peacemaker? The job of a peacemaker is also to resolve and diffuse conflict, not start the fights.
So if you're a peacemaker, that doesn't just mean that you say, whatever you want, babe. You don't just lay down and be compliant. You may have the argument and the disagreement, but you're not just saying, whatever, I don't care. Whatever you want, I don't care. That's apathy. That's not actually making peace with your spouse. If you are truly seeking peace in a situation, in a conflict with your spouse, you're looking for some sort of reconciliation. You want to make that problem go away with the help of your partner, the help of your teammate, the help of your loved one. So we have sort of, we've come to the agreement that we have rules for fighting because we know that the ultimate goal is that peace and reconciliation will come from that. And a lot of these rules don't just apply to your spouse. You could use these rules with your boss. You could use these rules with your children. You can use these rules with your siblings, your family members. Anytime that you get into a conflict with somebody, hopefully the ultimate goal is that you find peace and you find resolution with that person. And so there are some really practical things that you can do to help along that path. One of the things that we really work hard is we don't use words that are charged. Like if I say, you never take out the trash.
Hold on. I took the trash out 6 months ago, babe. That's
right.
a lie. That's a lie.
Never. You never once in our 15 years of marriage have you done that. Or if I say, you always make me feel bad about this. Never and always are just not true. And if you say that to them, they're going to justify it in their mind and say, no, I did it once. It was fine. And now the actual argument has taken a turn where it doesn't really need to go and it's not going to help anybody. So it's hard when you're in the middle of a conflict with somebody to stop and sort of think about what your words are going to say. But if you can avoid saying things that aren't true and that are emotionally charged, like never and always, I bet you start to see a difference. The other thing that we worked really hard at is I don't make you statements anymore. I make I statements. So instead of saying, I'm trying to think of a conflict that won't make anybody embarrassed in the room, especially you. You never put your socks in the laundry. You never clean up your dirty clothes. He does. He's really good at that. But you never put your clothes away when you get undressed for bed. Instead of saying that, I would say, I feel like I pick up your clothes after you a lot. It's not you. It's me. I feel like this. I am experiencing this. I am struggling with this because of this behavior. It's no longer an attack, a personal attack directly on him. It's my feelings, and this is what I'm going through, and you as my partner and my teammate, can you please help me with this? Even though it may be something that he is full right doing, he doesn't feel like I'm attacking him. He's like, oh yeah, okay, how can I help you with that, babe? Really, when you are in the middle of a conflict with somebody, you're not going to be rational, right? So a good thing to do is talk about these things beforehand and discuss what will you do and really think about these things. And we're up here today and we have fun and we make light with each other, but we weren't always like this. I mean, we've been married 15 years and it's a process and it's a daily decision that we wake up and we say, we love each other and we are going to make this marriage work. Because it's not every day that you feel like you want to make your marriage work. But every day you wake up and you make the decision, yes, we are going to stay together and we are going to be on the same team.
And most of the time I feel like that decision is pretty easy.
Oh, yes, me too.
All right, so I've got homework for you guys. We have homework for you. All right, so last week I sent you with some homework to work on your marriage. And this week, I have some homework for you. And I know the format's a little different, right? Having two people up here.
Was this okay? Did you guys enjoy this? Did you get something out of this?
Yeah, okay.
Did you notice that we matched? That might have been a conflict that we had to resolve. Talk about planning a sermon with your husband and having to discuss conflict resolution.
We both wore our fancy shoes.
Yes.
Yeah, so, all right. So we sent I got some homework for you guys. Okay, so we have some homework. We're going to wrap up here. We got some homework. So here's the thing. This works best if you can do it with your spouse. So if one side of the spouse is working on this and the other side isn't, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. It's doable, but it's going to be more difficult. So together, while in time of peace, don't wait until you have the conflict to try to figure this out. So today, if you guys are like doing good today as a couple, maybe today's the day. But if you're in the middle of a conflict, maybe you ought to wait until the conflict dies down a little bit to a peaceful moment so that you're able to do this rationally and be able to set out these rules. And you can talk theoretically, and you can make up fake names for each other if you need to, like Amanda and Mark or whatever. You can, whatever you need to navigate it, right? So number one is this. I want you to make a decision that you're on the same team. Make a decision that you're on the same team. And you guys need to vocalize that to each other. Listen, I'm in this with you.
There's so much power in telling your partner, I'm here, I support you. No matter what, I'm going to make this work. If you can say that to them, now they have the freedom to be real and to share their real intimate struggles and problems because they're not worried that you're going to leave.
And you got to set your fighting rules in the time of peace. Set your fighting rules in times of peace. And what I mean by that is, do you need that processing moment? Figure out the word that works for you. Maybe it's pineapple. I don't know. Get code words. We do code words. And I know that sounds silly, but rather than saying, I can't handle you right now, I need 5 minutes of break, I can just say pineapple, right? And then it's like, oh, well, that doesn't sound threatening at all, And so it's like mango or whatever it might be, Get some code words if you need to, because sometimes that helps. But get your fighting rules in place. Get it drawn out. No, we're not going to use the words always and never. I'm going to try to use I statements instead of you statements. And if I'm doing something that the problem is here in the middle, and you need to have the freedom with your spouse in the middle of the conflict to say, I feel like we've moved the conflict in between us, and I don't want that. Can we find a way to move the conflict out in front of us so that we're on the same team? And if you guys have come to the agreement with your homework here, then you're able to have that conversation. You're on the same page. You've previously determined that you want to do this. So when things start to escalate into an awkward situation, you can now call on it and say, I'm calling this. We're on the same team. Let's move this out. Let's throw the angry bird into the audience. Let's beat this conflict together, but let's change our tone a little bit. Or I need a break, or I need to come back, or I need to work. Set your fighting rules in your time of peace. And number 3, I want you to set your mind and just determine that you're going to speak words of life and not words of death into your marriage. And that means face-to-face, and that means when they're not there. And maybe you need to make a commitment to your spouse, maybe even today. Maybe you guys need to go home and take this list and talk through it together. And point number 3, you might say, you know what? There have been times that I have spoken words of death, and I need to apologize to you for speaking those words. I didn't mean to. I didn't want that. But yeah, I've done that before. And I don't want to do that anymore. So I'm making a fresh commitment to you today that I'm not going to speak words of death into our marriage anymore. I'm going to speak words of life. And so make that commitment to each other. Talk to each other face to face. Number 4 is this: start working on your peacemaking skills. This is a process. This doesn't happen overnight. Last week we talked about how when you go to the altar and you say I do, it's not like you instantly have this amazing character upgrade that just flashes in, right? What you've been working on all your life is what you're bringing to the table, which means today, what you're working on today will be your future tomorrow. So start building your future today. Start working on your peacemaking skills. Start speaking words of life into your marriage instead of words of death. Get on the same page and get your fighting rules in place so that you can move forward in a constructive way, not a destructive way. Don't compete with each other. You want to be able to be in a place where you complete each other. And I know this isn't all-encompassing, cover every area of marriage conflict, but we thought this morning we would take this time and just talk about a few of the tips and why we do it, and even the scriptural basis of where we have that one passage that really just covers it all. And so we thought we'd just kind of do that this morning, a little different. But this takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of time. Some of us here this morning, maybe you're in a place where your marriage is on the rocks right now, and you need someone to stand with you in prayer. We have prayer teams that are here this morning that want to pray with you. And so we're going to have prayer teams coming even right now, and they're going to be on either side of the stage, over here and over here, and they want to pray with you. And whether you're going through a marriage battle yourself or you just need someone to stand in prayer with you. Maybe it's not marriage that you need prayer for. Maybe it's you have a sickness or you have a battle or some other thing going on and you just need someone to stand with you in any area of your life. They are here and they want to pray with you. And so we're going to open those altars in just a moment. But I want to pray a prayer of blessing over every one of us here this morning, just over your marriage and your relationships. Will you guys just bow your heads with me? Heavenly Father,